and welcome to episode 8 of the Absolute Game of Nerds with your non geek, non nerd hosts, JP and Rohan. And today we have a special guest, our best interview yet. We have Mike from Lunch Money Comics here. He has a great YouTube channel, a family-friendly YouTube channel about collecting comic books. He does a lot more than just collecting comic books. But we brought him on here to talk about what he's been doing this year, or actually last year's when his show began. And he's really grown it in that short period of time. And I think that's fabulous. And we hope to be like Mike someday. Grow up to be like Mike, right? Like we used to say back in the 80s and 90s. So, Mike, thanks for being on today. We appreciate it.
No, thank you for having me, guys. This is really really cool.
Thanks for coming on, Mike.
Yeah, I'm super stoked that you're on today. I've been watching your show since it came out. Enjoy the fact that you bring your kid into it, on a regular basis. That's really cool also. But normally we start off with our guests talking about an origin. How did you begin in collecting? You can go back. You got a great story with how you used to collect back as a kid. So,
sure. Yeah. I grew up, I was real little in the 80s, and I've always been into like science and things like that, history, old things. So I've always been a collector of like, antiquities and old stuff like that. But in terms of like comic books and collectibles, when I was about, 7 years old, a family friend gave me a box of comic books, that they were just getting rid of. And there was probably like, 50, 75 comic books in there. Most of them were DC and most of those were Flash. And I like the Flash. I read through the books, but like it didn't really capture my imagination that much. There were some also books that were not okay for a 7-year-old. But there were a couple of comic books that were Marvel, and I always gravitated towards those. There was like a Spider-Man book, and I think one X-Men book. But I really took off when in the early 90s, and I'll never forget the sort of story. I used to live next to a playground, and I was over there with my friends, and this kid just came over and started talking to us. You guys like know these kids who just sort of like insert themselves into like a group of people. And I remember he was not annoying, but he was definitely like, we weren't really like hanging out with this kid, and everyone eventually left. It was just me and him, and he just wanted to hang out really bad. He was moving away from Massachusetts and just wanted to hang out. So I was like, I guess we'll hang out. And so I wanted to go to a card store, which is downtown. I like sport cards back at the time. I liked hockey.
I loved going to card stores.
Oh, it was awesome. Yeah, and we had a great one in my hometown. So I'm like, I might have been trying to ditch the guy. I don't know. I was like, hey, I'm going to this card store, so I can't hang out. I was like, oh, I'll go with you. And we went, and I was buying sport cards, but he saw these Marvel cards. The old Marvel cards that came out in the early 90s, like the
I have series 1, 2, and 3 still.
I have them right next to me. So he grabbed a pack. He's looking for a hologram. He opened the pack up. Hologram was there. He's like, here, take these cards. And I looked at those cards, and my mind was blown. I'm like, hey, these are the characters I saw in those, X-Men books I saw. Started collecting the cards, and that was the beginning of the end. I became a gigantic Marvel fan. And of course, with X-Men having the new series with the Jim Lee and, and then the cartoon coming out, I was hooked. And so I really collected in the early 90s when there was that big comic book boom, all the foil and all the chrome covers, they got me. And I collected off and on all through like the 90s and early 2000s. So, and I've always dabbled. Like you said, I'm an antique collector. I collect tons of other things, old war artifacts, natural history, rocks, gems, minerals, you name it, I collect it. So I always go to flea markets, and I live in New England, and we have them everywhere. I live, a couple towns away is the biggest flea market in the country. So I've been going forever, always collecting. But comic books were always my guilty pleasure, right? They were the one thing that like not a lot of my friends knew I collected. I didn't have a lot of comic book friends. So whenever I was out there at these flea markets, I'd always be, ooh, comic books, I have to look. And I don't know what it was, if it was the comic boom of 2021 that caused this, but when I was going like last year, I just saw more comic books than I was used to. They were everywhere. And I kept finding like incredible comics. Every time I went out, I'd find something amazing, really cheap. And after about, 6 weeks of just like having the best luck of my life, I really started concentrating just on comic books. And I was thinking, hey, people might like watching this. So I decided to start the channel. And I mean, people have asked me this in the past. I'm just going to answer before you guys even ask it. So the impetus of me starting it was I wanted to create the YouTube channel I wanted to watch. All of the comic book YouTubers I was watching were about comic book investments, about big ticket items, really expensive books. And here I am, a kid who grew up poor, scrounging my lunch money up to buy comic books, week to week. I just couldn't rationalize in my mind, even as like an adult with, disposable income now, spending a lot of money on like, an entombed plastic comic book. I really liked them. I thought it's a cool concept, but there were plenty of other YouTubers out there that were talking about that. And I just want to talk about the hunt, like going to flea markets, finding these things in back issues. They're out there, you know, like these grails are hidden out there. I like finding them. I like talking about the stories that mean a lot to me. So I started it on a whim, just for fun. I remember telling my wife, you know, when I had my son on that one of those early videos, and she was worried about people seeing. I'm like, no one's gonna watch this. No one cares about this. And then like 3 weeks in, I hit like a little lottery at a yard sale down the street and forget it. And it's been a roller coaster in the last 4 months of just subs and comments, and my collecting's picked up quite a bit, and I've just had the ride of my life. So that was a long origin story. I apologize, but that's why I'm sitting here with you guys.
I was gonna say a few things in regards to that. So one, I often actually think now that like, because when I was growing up in the '90s, at least where I grew up, there were card stores just as prevalent as comic book shops. Yeah. And now I know obviously cards are still a big deal, but you don't see, like, I still see there's still comic shops. I don't know of any sport card shops like there used to be anymore.
No, I think they sort of died a lot, like, you know, right when collectibles kind of were, in the 90s, and then, you know, then now they're coming back with all collectibles. But I agree. Yeah,
and then like I was gonna say, I as well, like that's how I started, was those Marvel cards. Series 1 and Series 2, and then Series 3 came up. That's the same kind of exact. And then the X-Men cartoon, Spider-Man cartoon, and me and JP have talked about, like, you mentioned the Jim Lee X-Men one. Like, it's easily the most influential. And the Todd McFarlane Spider-Man one, easily the two most influential comic books of our lives. And so it seems pretty common of all of us
completely
from
agree.
That generation.
Yep.
And then lastly, I'll say, there you go. There's the hologram.
The hologram, nice. X-Men hologram, your favorite, right? X-Men. Mike,
JP's getting fingerprints all over it. Look at that.
Right, it's already messed up. I found it like behind. It's all messed up already.
So people have asked me, like, what's the best thing I own, like comic book related? And honestly, like it's the cards. Like those cards, there's nothing in my life that takes me back to my childhood more than going through those cards. I don't know what it is, but I will never get rid of them till the day I die. I love them.
I've told this on my feed before that, like one of my favorite characters, my top 3 is Wolverine, Silver Surfer, and Batman. And my love of Silver Surfer started when someone in 4th grade handed me the Silver Surfer Series 2 card. And I remember flipping it over and seeing like the Power Rangers. I was like, my God, who is this person? Like, this is the character I want to follow. And it went from there.
I think that's actually why I like Nightcrawler too. When I was a kid, I was a small guy. I was very I thought I was kind of like a ninja. I was very quick, acrobatic, climbed a lot. And the idea that, like, same thing, you on the power level, Spider-Man, agility 6. Well, of course, it's Spider-Man. Nightcrawler, just as agile as Spider-Man. That blew my mind. Like, this blue guy is so quick and fast, and he teleports. I just couldn't get over the stats on the back, and that's what started my love for Nightcrawler. So,
and I'll tell you, Nightcrawler is a very, in my opinion, underappreciated character. And especially, like, when you watch, like, again, JP have talked about the original X-Men movies, I think are still so good. Like, X2, I think, is phenomenal. Still is. That opening scene with Nightcrawler in the White House, and, like, you don't really understand the abilities of Nightcrawler until you watch that scene, and you're like, holy crap, this guy could be lethal. Like, it is, or could be.
Which is why I like the Age of Apocalypse version of Nightcrawler, the Kurt Darkholm, where he was raised by Mystique. It's basically Nightcrawler without the morals, his Christian morals.
Yeah.
And he just flat out just, like, kills people with his teleportation powers. He just teleports their head away, and that's it. It's pretty cool to see.
Yeah. And I'll say, so the channel is a year old?
Not even. I started at the end of August 22.
I feel like to get to 4,000, that is crazy.
Yeah, I hit 1,000 in like 3 weeks, and like that was, I thought that was crazy. I'm like, I'm fine, I'm happy there, and then it's pretty much been 1,000 per month is about what the rate I'm at. Yeah.
Wow. JP, we got work to do, bro.
I know, but I mean, I started doing, I got back into it this early last year. And there's really no comic shops around me. There's one of them up, maybe 20 minutes up the road. And he, I don't know, he and I didn't get along. He didn't really, he had stuff up there for pretty big money, long story short. And I wanted to find something else. And someone said, why don't you check antique stores? And I travel a lot for work. So I stopped at one about an hour and a half south of me. She said, no, there's no comics here. But if you go to this one in this area I've never heard of, you might find something. And there was stacks of them. And I found, no, I wouldn't call it like your garage sale win, because I was going to mention that you got 800 comic books for like, what was it, $40?
Yeah.
I mean, that, and one of them was Secret Wars 8, right? Is what you got was in part of that. I mean, I got an Iron Man, what was it? Iron Man 39 and a couple other ones. And I paid nothing like you did, 5 cents a book or 10 cents a book, but just knowing that they were out there just kept me going. And I probably hit every antique store within 100-mile radius of my house.
Right.
I went to Long Beach, California, went to one there, took an Uber, cost me more than what the comics were to get there and back. Yeah. I hit them all the way down to vacation because I'm on the East Coast like you. So I was going down to Ocean City, and I hit a bunch of them down there, and I found, Gambit, what was it, X-Men Annual 14. So just that drive when you find them. And I said to you earlier, when I couldn't hunt, I liked watching people do the hunt. And Mint Hunter was one of them, but I don't think I find any 9.8s when I go out there. They're, it's all, they're mostly, I'm just happy to find a copy. Low grade is better than no grade. And then I found your show popped up. I'm like, this is perfect. And you were out in the antique area, summertime, just as I was doing, and you had it out there. And I just totally enjoyed the show.
I mean, the luckiest thing for me is that, the where I live. I mean, I am in New England. We are big on flea markets. Obviously, it's a very historical area. We have lots of antique shops. And so, it's really easy for me to not only we have comic book stores and antique places, but in the summer, the flea markets are crazy. I mean, they're everywhere. I can do any search, in New England small. Every state has several of them. I'm within an hour and a half of all the New England states in New York. So, I have endless supply of places to hunt. I will kind of joke that all the places I've been talking about local, not only have I picked through them, but people are going constantly. Whenever I go now, I'm clearly I'm giving away all the secrets, but I'm happy that people are doing it, honestly, because again, people get so worried about spending money and not finding comic books. They're out there. I'm happy people are looking at non-traditional places.
On that note, I was telling my wife and I were talking about this actually this weekend. We were watching some of the football games. We were watching the Bengals Bills game. We were talking about if you wanted, you could. If you're, let's see, who is it? The Bills are on the road, or the Bills are at home. So it was if you're a Bengals fan, and it's if you wanted to, you theoretically could just make that drive. And we were talking about how, I think I've talked about this with JP, seeing I've watched your show. You're in New England. Like I said, JP's in Pennsylvania. And he talks about how he drives to these antique shops. I'm in the Seattle area. For us, everything seems so far away.
Right.
There is no whereas I watch your channel and you're I'm in Connecticut, I'm in New Hampshire, I'm in I can't. There's no way I could do something like that.
No, everything's super close out here. It's kind of nice. But I have gone to New York. I've seen Bruins games at Islanders games. But my sister lives actually in Oregon, in Portland, and they have gone up to Seattle to watch the Whitecaps and stuff, the Sounders, I should say. They love soccer, so you can make the drive. It's just you're talking 6+ hours to go anywhere instead of 2 for me.
Yeah, I mean Portland in all reality is not that far, but just in terms of that's it, right? Whereas you guys have this whole you got essentially the whole eastern seaboard, right?
Much. Yeah.
Well, does your antique store have a map that tells you all the antique stores in the area? Mine produces a book or a pamphlet that I can open up and I can find 100 antique stores. They may not have comics, but they're antique stores.
Right. I mean, there's just so many of them. I mean, every town has them. So, I mean, I don't even need a really map. I can just search on Google or just type in antique stores, and every town has it. But we have books, especially when Brimfield's the massive antique show. When that comes out, there's lots of cross promotion. So you're aware of every antique place within, 100 clicks.
So Mike, you were saying how because of your channel now you see people going to the same shops you're going to.
Oh yeah.
So you have 4,000 followers. So you go to X flea market. Do you find people just hyenas right behind it? Just all right, this is the guy. He's gonna...
Not poaching, but I bump into people all the time. I was actually shocked. Someone recognized me the first month of my channel, which blew my mind. He's like, oh, you're that new YouTuber. I thought that was pretty cool. And I had a mask on and he still recognized me. But now, now people recognize me a lot locally, and especially the comic book stores and the shows. I'll bump into people a lot. So it's fun though. I mean, it's weird, to be honest with you guys. It's very strange. I'm wicked flattered. I mean, I can't believe the response I've gotten. It's very flattering and humbling. But I've never quite got over it. It always makes me kind of jump back for a second. I'm or people even weird is when they look at me. I know they recognize me, but they're trying to be polite. And I just wish they'd just be just say it. Just say hi. It's more weird that you're just looking at me out of my peripheral.
I mean, to be honest, I get caught off guard nowadays since we started this channel. So otherwise, my only time I connect with people comic book related was on Instagram. Where you have your handle mine's Back in the Game Comics, and now I don't know, because of the show and because it's increased our connections to different people. People will comment Rohan this and Rohan that, and I'm like, oh shit,
right.
Now, and I love it. I'm all for it. I have no issue with that. It's like you said, getting
it's
recognized, that would be another level of that.
It's always weird. Again, especially coming from a place where I started this for fun. I still do it for fun. I'm not doing this for money or anything. I'm doing it because I'm enjoying it. It's weird that it's become this big of a part of my life. It's been a great ride, but I don't know if I'll ever get over it. To be honest with you, it's always going to be strange considering how many other things I do in my life. You know, I'm a busy dad of two. It's just for something I always consider sort of a small guilty pleasure in my life. It's weird to be like have that be the thing people start knowing me for. It's just weird. I'll get used to it. I guess.
Yeah, it's crazy that in just that short period of time that how many people recognize you out there, and as you're searching, you're in a big area given Connecticut, New York. I start to notice the dealers now, but none of them really know my name because on Instagram it's under Nerd Alert, not under me. But that's crazy how much.
Once you start putting your face there, like they start seeing. The weird one is twice this has happened. People recognize me by my voice, which I didn't think I had really an iconic voice. Like sort of mumble. I have a Boston accent. I'm trying to hide all the time. But a couple of people have like turned the corner, like you're Lunch Money Comics. I can tell. It's
nice.
From my voice. How weird is it? Maybe they listen to it like as a podcast. They don't watch it. So I don't. Maybe that was it. But
I mean, I oftentimes will like have it on like YouTube, but like I'll be driving, so it'll just be like on the side thing, and I won't watch, but I'll see.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you don't do a podcast, right? You just have yours is YouTube that doesn't download the pod.
Right, exactly. Maybe I'll cross that bridge when I get to it. Same thing. Like people have asked me if I do like live videos. When I figure out how to do it, and I actually can carve out some time. But like I mentioned in a recent video, I usually do all my recording like late at night, like after the family's in bed. So if I did live stuff, I'd have to like carve out like dinner time or whatever. It's just difficult for me. So for right now, I just record and post. It's easy. I'm always like 4 or 5 videos out too. The only way I can do it. I'll do like 3 or 4 antique places, flea markets in a weekend, and then sort of schedule them all out just to make it easier on me with my schedule.
Yeah.
And I saw the most recent ones. You went to there's a big sale at a comic book store near you, right? And the Christmas one.
Yeah.
So you found all that stuff for a good price. The guy was, and that's probably helping you out too, that they know you, plus you're going to their store, right? And then
it's a little bit of promotion, certainly, because they know, like, and that guy, Nishan up in His and Her Comics in Greenfield, he's a great guy, and a lot of like local vendors also go there. Everyone seems to be like friends, like I know barbershop. That's what I love about it. Like the old barbershop where everyone like knows each other. That's what it kind of feels like at some of these local comic book stores out here, and so he's a really good guy in general. But as I've mentioned him a couple times, even the first time I mentioned him, we did a giveaway. He was getting phone calls from all over the country asking if he ships. We had people driving up from New York, or Vermont coming down, driving hours just to check out the store because I mentioned it. So I think he was very appreciative.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Heck yeah.
And I like promoting this stuff too. These small stores, like it's worth it. I think it's worth it for them, and I don't need anything from them. I just want to mention them and get some people in there for them. I think it's it's tough to have a small business these days. Any help I can provide, I'm happy to.
Totally. Yeah, I was gonna say, kind of circling back in general to the channel, like what I really appreciate about like you said, like everyone else talks about for the most part investment. And don't get me wrong, like I love it. I watch a lot of them, right? Mm-hmm. But that's what I'm saying. It's like it's so like everyone's talking about like how you can do this and with this the money you buys, and like that's kind of how JP and I started. Right? It was just like someone was like, I kind of just want to talk about comic books. Like maybe one episode is about investment, maybe one day is about like we're planning to do it. Our next episode is going to be like our favorite covers from each era. Right. And it's just like, we just want to talk about comic books. And so like, I enjoy your channel for the fact that like, it's just comic books. This is what I found today. Bam, bam, bam. I like this book. I'm a fan of the X-Men.
Yeah. And I don't want to say it was a pushback against those guys. I watch those guys too. I love it. It's fascinating.
That's by no means by no means a criticism. I think
and I'm certainly cognizant of what these are worth and things like that. And there's an exit strategy for when I retire. Sure. But my big thing is, like I said, I started the channel I wanted to watch, and the big takeaway I had is I'm watching all these guys, and I really like them and respect them, but I always felt like they were catering to like the top 10% of comic book buyers. Like here I am, a kid who grew up really poor, scrounging nickels and dimes to buy comic books, and even as an adult, I'm trying to be frugal. I didn't want to see like when someone says, "Oh, look at this book's a deal at $2,000." Most comic book buyers, like dads like me, don't spend that kind of money and wouldn't want to, even if they had it. Like you can collect comic books much cheaper and enjoy them. And again, I'm cognizant of it, but it's not something I need to talk about because other guys have this covered way better than I ever would. So that's where that comes back. I just don't want anything I'm pushing back against that. I get it. I'm into it too, but it's just not something I'm interested in talking about on my channel,
Yeah.
So what would you say your, when your collection itself, do you have any goals of things that you're trying to get? Like one of the things I started doing by the antiques and flea market was to find stuff with margin, right? I found a good deal and then I could flip it, because if it's in front of me, like, I don't know if you ever heard of the Bone series by Jeff Smith. So I found, Jeff Smith, I found 1 and 2. One was a second print. Number 2 was a first print. So I found that in the wild. I like to call it in the wild. And I don't really care for that book, but I know somebody does.
Right.
So got it for a good price. So I wanted to flip it.
Right.
To get something better.
So, yeah, I mean, there is an element of that. I feel like it was more, I was doing that more before. Like, again, I deal with antiques a lot, so I'm always have an eye for that sort of stuff. And it used to be, if it was a good deal, I always bought it. And for a long time, honestly, because of the channel, I would buy things, even if I didn't necessarily want it. If it was good to talk about, I would buy it. And I've been trying to cut back on that, trying to get books that I only want for my personal collection. Now, I'm not immune to that. If I find a good deal, obviously, I'm going to buy it. And I always keep in mind, can I, make money off it? But in general, I've been trying to really sort of curate what I'm into, and mostly for me, it's
yeah. So I was gonna say, so then, what is kind of your goal with the collection in terms of, like, do you just want like a big collection? Do you want like all the X-Men? Do you want to collect an X-Men run, or do you want to like use these books to find in antique stores and like pile a bunch together and then boom, X-Men 1 comes your way?
Yeah, sort of that. So for my big ultimate goal is to have all the X-Men. Like right now I'm doing, Chris Claremont, like, giant size X-Men all the way up to like 300 or so. And some of the other X books like New Mutants and things like that. So I'd love to have all of those filled in. Then I'll start going back to like X-Men 1 would be like my ultimate grail, I suppose. So yeah, it's sort of like I get all these books, I collect, start getting some bigger books, and then eventually, trade up, sell up till I just have the X-Men books I want. I mean, ideally, I have a lot of comic books back here, and they're great. I love looking at them, but there is something to be said about quality over quantity. There is a certain point where it's much easier just to have one big book that you have in your collection that you're proud of, that you ever could sell, like when you retire or whatnot, than have 45 long boxes of smaller books.
Right.
Those are just harder to move. So, I mean, my ultimate goal is just to have the big books I've always wanted since I was a kid, have all the X-Men books, and I think I could die happy if that was my end goal. But in the meantime, yeah, buying small, finding things cheap, trying to find good deals where they could be had, filling in just my general love of Marvel Comics. That's my midterm goal. Yeah.
So we had,
go ahead.
So we had a guy, Errol, on a few weeks ago, and his quest was 20 years. He got him to Superman #1. And one of the things he says is like, you don't need so many. He's like, pick a character, collect that character. So is that for you is the X-Men then?
Pretty much. Yeah. I've dabbled in so many other ones. I'm happy to have them, but as soon as I have it, I say, for the price of these 3 books, I really like, I could have got something I really wanted instead. I could have got that grail. You have that moment all the time. Like, these are great, but I'd rather have the bigger one.
Totally.
So yeah, that's probably my ultimate goal is having X-Men 1, I guess, if I was to pick an end goal. Sure.
What would you say your let's say your top 5 books that you'd want to have? And the ones that any ones you have now, because I know you have X-Men. Giant Size X-Men 1 already.
Yeah, so and I have a funny story with that if you guys want to hear it. So Giant Size X-Men #1 was my grail book when I was a kid because of Nightcrawler. Nightcrawler was my favorite. So I always wanted that book. And I've had several moments in my life where I could have had it and passed. I'll never forget, I just got married. I had like $300 from like, my birthday or Christmas, like I had $300 eating a hole in my pocket. And a local comic book store had Giant Size X-Men #1. I saw that the other day on your channel. Jealous. I saw Giant Size X-Men #1, and I had a choice. I could buy Giant Size X-Men #1 for $300 in like mid-grade, probably a 4.5, or a new telescope. And I'm a huge astronomy fan, cosmology fan, physics fan, and of course, I chose the giant telescope. It's a great telescope. Don't get me wrong. I've got a lot of mileage out of it, but I go back and I kick myself when I think about it.
How long ago was that again?
20 years ago, probably.
Okay,
if that, maybe a little.
Yeah, you could now sell that GSX 1 and get a lower grade one, say, and the telescope.
I could have gone to space, probably, right? So for years I've been looking at that, and again, same thing that happened to a lot of people during COVID. We actually put an addition on the house, and I was cleaning through all of my collections, and I was looking at a lot of stuff I had when I was younger, and I realized I only wanted to hold on to the comic books, and I decided to sell a lot of other stuff. I sold some sport cards, some CCG cards. Had the money, I put aside a good chunk of money just to buy a GSX 1. And I wanted a mid-grade. I wanted a 4.5, a 5 or 6. I had the money set aside for it. And then I was on vacation up in Maine. My sister and her fiance have a place up in Maine, middle of the woods on a lake. And I had a couple of reminders, like on eBay, like that a book is coming up I wanted to buy, mid-grade ones. And there was one that was lower grade that I wanted. It was a 3.5, but it presented really nice. And it was really low. It was at like $1,300. So I set a reminder on my phone. Alert goes off. I run back to the cabin, and I'm trying to bid on it. And I finally put a bid of like $1,800, and it's just spinning. Middle of the woods. And then finally it refreshes, and it had sold for like $1,700. And it didn't register my thing, and I was like on tilt, like at like a casino. I immediately started looking for like other things, and I just happened at that moment looked on like I think it was Facebook. Yeah, it was like a Facebook like comic buying thing.
Yeah.
And mere hours before, someone had posted a graded 2.5 X-Men. I think they had like $2,000 on it, and they had just posted it, and they were in Rhode Island. So on a whim, I was angry. I just texted like, "Hey, would you take like $1,700 for this? I'll pay you cash today." And then we're driving back to Massachusetts, to Western Mass, and right when I drop the kids off and I unload the car, after driving for like 3 hours, the message pops up: "If you can meet me in Rhode Island in like an hour and a half before this mall closes, it's yours." Jump in the sorry, honey, I gotta go. Jump in the car, race there. And again, it was a lower grade than I wanted. It's a 2.5 white pages. But I fell into my lap, and I got it much cheaper. So yeah, I still want a better graded one, but I satiated my appetite momentarily by getting. I can say I got my grail, but immediately, you guys know how it is. You start looking for the better book.
Yeah.
Can I get a 5 or a 6? So I'm starting to eyeball it already. Yeah.
Is that numero uno in the collection?
Probably. Yeah, it has to be. Just from a personal standpoint, absolutely it is. Financially, yeah, maybe it might be financially too. It's around there. Yep.
Yeah, mine is. I bet that and my FF48 are my two top.
Oh, way up on my list. Yeah.
Are you? I don't know if you saw our video on the hunt for 181. Is that something you're interested in at all?
Yes, very much so. Same thing. I had an opportunity to buy it for $400 about 20 years ago. Didn't happen. What's funny? I'm one of those guys too. Like first appearances, I like it. Their actual first appearance. So like 180 appeals to me too. 180 might be like my compromise. But yeah, so never mind the X-Men 1. I collect first appearances of all the X-Men. That's my ultimate goal, the whole run. But I want all of the first appearances of the X-Men. So I need to have 181. And I'll bridge my way up to X-Men number 1 by getting that one first, I suppose. So it's on the radar. It's just so overpriced. It's such a hot comic book commodity. It's not a rare book, but everyone wants it. So it's one of those books I feel like I'm never going to get a good deal. It's never going to come back down. It's just going to keep climbing. So,
well, that's what was part of the conversation with Errol about Superman 1 is he was big on you're going to overpay if you want it bad enough in some cases, and you just got to do it. I can't bring myself to spend that on the comic. I don't know. It seems like it takes so long to sell all the individual pieces unless you have a bunch of $300 books that. Right. Like I got a bunch of stuff on eBay now, and I think I sold, I don't know, $100 worth of stuff, and I'll be like, paddling across the Lake Erie in order to get the other side and get Hulk 181. So it just seems like either you got to bite the bullet and buy it and feel that it's going to appreciate or not.
Right. And if you actually do the math and figure out like how much you spend on comic books in general, like if I was to add it up, if I just don't buy comic books for a while, like you just save up the money the old-fashioned way. You can do it. And like I said, I have a separate account that I use just for antique collecting and comic books. Yeah, eventually that'll grow, and maybe I'll just pull the trigger someday. But I have too much fun buying other stuff. Well,
that's what I mean. And then you're out in the hunt, and you find something. You're like, oh, look at this! Like you found that Superman that it was new core or no core, which was really interesting. I was just out the other day in out by near Buffalo. And I was in an antique store looking around for maybe old oil and gas advertisements, see if it was in there, because I never would have thought that had some value. But you got a couple $100 for it, right?
And and it's cool because I just had to ask. I mean, you start, again, there's tons of yard sales. I don't know what you guys call them, tag sales, garage sales. What do you guys call them?
Yard sale, garage. Yep.
Garage
sales, so I call them yard sales, the Boston accent.
Yard.
So I go to them all the time, and because I like antiques, you never know what you can find. But my general rule is like if you see something you kind of like, just to ask, because a lot of times people have other stuff like inside they're not willing to sell. So this guy had tons of like Funko Pop and like action figures, and but he also he had sport cards. He had like gold and silver things. So I just asked, like, hey, do you have any comic books? He's like, no, but I have this, and he sold it to me for $10, and I just thought it was cool because it's Superman.
What is it?
It was a pamphlet for Conoco Entane gasoline from the early 1940s, but it had Superman on the back. And it was just a brochure. It was like a fake interview between like a fake reporter and like a scientist saying, oh, this is the best gasoline to put in your car. But evidently Conoco had a deal with like DC Comics or all those licensed heroes back then to appear on their oil and gas merchandise. So, this you can find them with like Batman or Superman. But this brochure was from like early 40s, like 1941 or 2. So you're talking Superman's only like 4 or 5 years old. And the more I looked into it, I couldn't find an exact example of it, but everyone I showed it to was like, yeah, I mean, that's about as early as Superman you can get and not have it be in a comic book. So, I got it for $10. and I ended up selling it for $250, I think, a quick flip
Nice.
on it. So, what I liked about it was that it wasn't just a comic book related thing. As an antique collector, I thought it was fascinating. I actually got 3 brochures. The other 2 were purely gas and oil, and I have them with my antiques. They're just neat to see like that period of time, in the 40s or 50s. The cool things they did with like looking at the old cars and the oil and stuff they put into them, and I just thought it was interesting. And you had the bonus aspect of having Superman on it. It was just like a perfect collectible for me. So just a cool find in general. I kind of wish I still had it, honestly. It's just unique. You don't find it again. So
yeah, that's super cool.
Yeah.
And I know you said one of your goals for 2023 is to collect more DC, correct?
Yes.
So I wore my Superman shirt for that reason.
Oh, thanks.
Figuring
I don't
more
even have a DC T-shirt. It's awful. Yeah, I gotta get one.
I think all 3 of us are more. I mean, besides Batman, most of us are Marvel at at the core of it, and that's the majority of my collection. But I think DC is going to change this year, and with James Gunn, so there might be some some of the ones that you find maybe worth some more here as we go on. But
yeah, I mean, I'm looking forward to it. I mean, there's so many times I have a pretty good memory for things. I'm pretty knowledgeable about the comic books I like, but there's a lot of times I'm going through boxes of DC stuff. I'm like, I don't know what's in here is worth money. Like there might be some keys I'm just completely missing, and that kind of bugs me. Like I wish I was more educated on that. But I don't dislike DC. This, like I said, the first comic books I ever got were DC. I've always liked the Flash. Green Lantern is really cool. Obviously, Batman. I used to joke. I used to kind of knock DC. I used to say Batman was the best superhero, but Marvel's clearly better than DC. That was more of a knock to the rest of DC. Like he brings Batman down. But I do like it, and honestly, I've been reading, and I definitely enjoy it. Especially like it when there's a writer or an artist that I know from Marvel Comics that I can read in DC. It's neat. It's refreshing. You see them. I still like their style, but it's in a completely different.
It is very interesting to me, and I would be interested to learn the stories of each about how many artists and or writers worked for both and had a back and forth of some kind, right? Like there's not an artist that I know that did it that I can name, right? I obviously don't know any of the current modern ones. I'm not a big modern guy, but you think about it, with the exception of Stan Lee, I mean Jack Kirby worked for both, Neil Adams worked for both, right? It's crazy.
I think it's actually probably more likely you'd find more people who went both ways than one or the other. Like Chris Claremont was pretty exclusive Marvel.
Yeah.
Alan Moore was pretty much just DC. But everybody else, they were all over the place. But that's
where they could find work at, probably. It was all about getting to work at that time.
Yeah.
Right.
And I think JP and I talked about this on another episode that we have that love for Marvel, and I think a lot of the reason why people are in that boat is just that DC, and obviously Batman doesn't necessarily fit this bill. Maybe this is why Batman is so popular. It's DC is kind of this battle of God level.
You got it.
Heroes and villains, right? What's great about Marvel is they have those level tier people, but the characters you love also have like Spider-Man. You went through high school and had to deal with this, and you can relate to that so much more. And I think that's why so much more people gravitated towards those characters.
That's exactly it. And that's what set Marvel apart, I think, in the 60s with Stan Lee writing. The characters are relatable. Spider-Man is a kid with real problems, and he also has superpowers, which is kind of cool, which also has its own set of problems. The mutants, the X-Men, are outcasts. As a really nerdy kid when I was little, I really related to the X-Men because they were outcasts, but they were powerful in their own right. People took them for granted. I think there's that relatability. And what I think is interesting about DC specifically is that people always say they're not relatable. You're right. Superman seems like a god, almost like a Christ figure that is unrelatable. But that's not necessarily true. That's just the way people have turned him into in recent years. The most relatable thing about him is that he's Clark Kent. He was raised in Kansas by a mom and a dad. There was that aspect I think people related to a long time ago that over the years he's become sort of this god figure. It's hard to relate to him. And Bruce Wayne, even though he's a human, Bruce Wayne, I do not relate to a vigilante billionaire. I don't. I have nothing in common with Batman at all.
I more relate to Punisher than I do Batman, I tell you that.
Exactly, yeah.
I mean, of DC, it's Batman and Superman for me. And I grew up on Batman and Superman just as much as I did X-Men and stuff, so I love them. I always tell people, I think Superman gets a bit of a bad rap, because people are always oh, he's just too powerful. He can do everything. And I'm just you gotta think. He was the first superhero, right? And so, you gotta imagine when you came up with the concept of superheroes, well, what can he do? Everything. That's what makes him a superhero, right? So you gotta cut him some slack for that.
Exactly. And then over the years, that's why they've always had so many Kryptonite came about. They had to cut it back a little bit to make some stakes, some real stakes, And I think they kind of did that. I was joking in a recent video. I had all these old Bronze and Silver Age books DC books. In every other book, Superman's like tied up in some way. Like, and he gets tied up in every single book. There's something to foil him because he's just an immediate solution to any problem they would have. They kind of had to write that in, but I feel like all they got to do is really appeal to his humanity instead of his sort of alienness. And I think there's the relatability they need. You don't always need to come up with a gimmick to make him weaker.
Well, it's the same thing I guess with Batman, that he never would use a gun and find a way to defeat everybody without a gun. I think early on he might have used some guns, but
early Detective Comics issues, he used a gun.
But then there was this time frame, I think, that he wasn't supposed to use the gun. And same with everyone got so mad at the Henry Cavill Man of Steel whenever he killed Zod, and Superman's not supposed to kill anybody. And he broke his neck, and people, had a conniption over that. And I thought it was a cool scene. He was trying to save somebody.
But Christopher Reeves killed Zod in Superman 2.
Well, you don't know if they died. They just fell down that hole.
Yeah,
like the Emperor. The Emperor in Star Wars.
He can come back.
Human, and then threw him down a pit. I'm pretty sure they died.
And speaking of that, I wasn't collecting in the 70s. I mean, that was roughly when I was born. I was more in the collecting in the late 80s. But that Superman movie did it for me. I mean, and Superman 2. Superman 1 was the scene with the helicopter falling and saving Lois Lane. And then whenever he got his powers back in Superman 2 and foiled them all and then broke Zod's hand and then lifted him up and threw him. I mean, that was I was like, man, that's awesome.
Number 3 and 4 didn't do it for you. Those movies are terrible.
I did like 3 though. That robot.
That scared the crap out of me when I was a kid. I hated that part.
As a kid, 3 and 4 you thought were pretty awesome, I'm sure.
Right? Oh yeah.
Except for the robot, man. I still have nightmares about it.
When she got pulled in, I was like, oh my God. And I was I didn't like that at all.
But the Richard Donner, I mean, they still hold water. If you watch those Superman 1 and 2, they're still incredible superhero movies. And I mean, I hate to say it, but what elevates that, of course, is the score. I mean, I'm a musician, so you get the Williams score there, one of the best movie scores of all time. It's just the best superhero theme of all time. You can hear that anytime, any place, and it immediately brings you back to that time. It's just great movie, perfect score, just serendipitous and so many factors that came together. Awesome movie, it'll last forever. Yep.
I brought this up several times already, because of our episode that we did with Errol on his quest for Superman 1, I was like, I gotta rewatch these movies, and they're on HBO Max if you have that app. And so I watched Superman 1 and 2 in the last 3 weeks. Yeah, you're exactly right. They absolutely are still just great superhero films.
And you got to remember too, when that first movie came out, the special effects of Superman flying, people hadn't seen that. We take it so for granted now with computer graphics. That was amazing. I mean, all the tags for all the movie posters was you will believe a man can fly, because people weren't used to seeing good special effects of someone soaring through the sky, and that was revolutionary. It blew people away. Yeah, so again, we take it for granted now, but it was pretty amazing at the time.
Yeah, that was. I mean, DC had the best movies if you go back to it. I mean, I didn't really collect Superman, but I loved the movie, and Batman I didn't really collect. But that first Batman movie with Michael Keaton, and again Jack Nicholson, I always can never remember.
Nicholson,
not the golfer.
Nicholson, not the guy. I know. Always, for whatever reason, I can never get the two done in my head. I got to think of something in my head to remind me the difference between the two. But that was just a great movie overall, even the second one. So you had a good string of DC movies. Over that time frame, and nothing for Marvel. But Marvel was still more popular when it came to collecting. I mean, Black Superman was the thing I saw. I'm like, why is he in the black suit? And that was the first one I grabbed. I didn't grab the Superman from the movie, but I grabbed
Black Spider-Man.
Black Spider-Man, right? So he had the black symbiote suit, and I was like, he's supposed to be red and blue. What's that? And I pulled it off the shelf at 7-Eleven, and that was the first comic I showed you that I had collected, was that Amazing Spider-Man 269. And just because of I knew him being different, and it just intrigued me. But I didn't grab the Superman. I don't have old Superman or Batman books. I mean, really, it was all Spider-Man. And that was my other question I was going to ask you, Mike, is behind your wall of comics, not what's behind there, but behind you, are all those your books as a kid, or those ones that you've gotten recently?
Almost all the ones on the wall are ones I've had since I was a kid. Yeah, I mean, that lower one here, there's some monster ones here, and there's some recent ones over here. I've talked about my channel. I think even when in my videos, I cut off the top row. But most of those are ones I had as a kid, yeah. And because I don't want to put really nice books up there. I'm just kind of worried they're going to get damaged. So I just put fun ones up there that I like.
Now, would you sell those, or those have meaning because you had them as a kid? I mean...
Some of them. I mean, I might make a video on this someday. I actually have my long box I had as a kid, and I haven't really touched it. I've taken a few books out here and there. I ended up trading a few, but in general, they're the same books. For the same reason, like the Marvel cards, I love looking back and having all the nostalgia feels. I like going through that box and remembering, oh man, I remember when I got this. And they're like, there's lots of gimmicky, bad 90s comics in there. But a lot of those, yeah, I mean, they're not worth anything. So they're not worth anything financially. So they're not worth selling. How about that? So I have nothing in there that it's worth more money than what it means to me personally. So probably not.
And I have my short box, and I had a short box, and I had sold a couple books like Spider-Man, ASM 298, 99, 300. I sold them a couple years back. Kind of like you said early on in COVID, you sold some things. And when I got back into it last year, I said, I got to get those back. I should have never sold them. Now, I paid like 3 times what I sold them for, but I had to get them back. And that short box, what's behind me, all the McFarlanes, those are from when I was a kid, from my collecting days. And, Rohan and I talk about this, getting rid of he doesn't have his books from when he was a kid. So he doesn't have any sentimental value to the ones like you and I might have. But I have a Hulk 340. I wouldn't sell. Even if I get Incredible Hulk 181, I still want to have that McFarlane book, because that's the one I got. I got it graded, and
I just sold my 340 this week to put towards the 181 pot.
Yeah,
it brought a tear to my eye.
Yeah, so I mean, I think I have some similar situations to that, but I mean, I've said this on my channel a million times too. Like the sentimental value. Like if people are collecting, like they always ask me what to collect. Collect what you like, because even if it's not worth anything financially, it's worth something to you. And it's kind of cliche, but you'll never be poor, right? If you have things that you actually enjoy. I do have some regrets. I did same thing. I never do this, but I mentioned all those comic books I got when I was a kid, mostly DC. A lot of those I traded. I got a bunch of cool Marvel books for it. But there was stuff in there I didn't really think was worth that much money. I had like a Firestorm #1, a Power Girl #1. I had a whole bunch of old Batman. They weren't necessarily like keys, but they were all from the 60s and 70s, which are collectible. And in retrospect, when I start now that I'm getting back into DC and I'm actually looking at it and seeing how my collection's grown, the stuff I got, probably not as rare as the stuff I gave away, and I don't know if I'll ever be able to recreate that. And because it was originally part of my old set that was in my childhood long box, there's a missing piece now. I feel like going back, I'm like, I don't have those ones. So, yeah, I mean, there's something to be said about that. I think, I think a lot of people hold on to that sentimental value of these collectibles, and I don't think that's a bad thing at all.
Yeah, I would say like when it comes to trading and things like that, because I've been doing a lot of trading to kind of level up my collection. I think, and when you see, like we were talking about earlier, it's like you may see something it's not your cup of tea, but like you got good margin on it, as JP would say, and you can flip that up. I think a good rule though too is like when you're trading, is like if you can't trade it, be sure that it's something you'd be happy to keep. Like I was trying to make some trades earlier, and some guy offered me these, and he's like, "Oh, these are worth these go for $1,000 or whatever," and I was like, I don't know them, and I don't know therefore if anyone else and it's like I showed them to you, and I'm like, so like if I get stuck with them, like these aren't book, I'd rather just keep the one that I'm trying to trade than this one.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I've had a couple of regrets. I love trading; it's fun. And I've done a lot of trades this year, and I don't regret many of them. Like usually it's something that you want. There's a couple I've second guessed, in the future. But like I said, if you could just look at the book you have, don't worry about what you gave away. Just do you enjoy what you have? And I think that's a good way. You can't really look back.
Yeah, I talked to. I don't know if you guys follow the 9.9 newsstand. It's a feed on Instagram, another comic book one. And he and I talk often. And he said something to me last week because he's big into like getting something and then moving on to the next thing. Like he'll get something. He said, I love chasing things and then I love selling them and moving on. And so like I was talking about, I was like, what is forever PC to you? And he's like, I don't really consider anything forever PC. It's all just part of the journey. And he's like, if I've had it, it's still kind of a part of my collection. I just have used it to kind of along my journey. And a lot of that resonated with me. Like, I totally get that. Like, obviously I'm going to have books like my FF48, my GSX1. They're not going anywhere. But like, for the most part, like, I totally agree. Like I said, I sold that Hulk 340. I love that book, but like, I don't miss it. Like, cause especially when I know that I'm using it toward my journey to 181.
Right. Yeah, and I think especially in a case like that, like again, if you can look at what you got and be happy with it, I think you're okay. Same, like you're actually a great example on the journey. There's been a couple books I traded away. I was kind of mad I did it, but I almost feel like I can say people have always asked me. People asked me multiple times. I didn't get it at first. They always say, "Have you owned this book before?" Like when I bought that GSX1, have you owned a GSX1 before? I'm like, no. But there are books that I can go back and time like I did own that. There was a moment in time I was pretty happy having that book. I'm happy to have said I owned it. Like it's kind of a cool way of looking at it. It's part of your journey, right? It's part of your history. You don't need to have it on person to know that you enjoyed it at a point in time. So.
Now, I have a buddy who has every car he ever owned still.
Wow.
Okay, he's an attorney, so he can kind of do that, but he lives in different states. So I said, "You still have the car that we used to, and I used to drive, and he used to drive in college?" He's like, "Yeah, I still have that Eclipse." I'm like, "Where's it at?" He said, "Oh, it's in Pittsburgh," and he's on the other side of the country. Right. And I'm like, "What do you do with it?" And he's like, "That's in the garage." But that's his thing to keep all his cars. And there's some things that, you had it. Like I had a Trans Am. I don't miss it, but I guess some days when you want to drive really fast, I wish I still did. And other days I'm happy to have a fuel, economy car. I you know what I mean? Like I don't feel the need to either. Once you got rid of it, it's gone, right? And if you got decided it at the time, and if you want to get it back, I guess if they're not as rare, like Rohan says, you can get them back anytime, like that 340. But there is some sentimental value to some things that just isn't worth trading, and other things.
I mean, I had some pretty crappy cars growing up, so I'm happy to be gone. I'm happy to get rid of some of those. They went to a junkyard, they got crushed, and I have no attachment whatsoever. Thank goodness.
The Pontiac POS, I was happy to get rid of that car.
Exactly.
But I don't know, his car. None of them were that. One of them was a Buick, like a LeSabre, and I'm like, well, you still have that car?
Wow.
We like painted that with
why?
A roller.
I know.
But it's just sentimental value to him, and I'm like, I don't get that. Whereas there's some. I have GI Joe that I recently sold, and I was okay with selling those, even though I played with them as a kid. Somebody else, I got some good prices for them, and I was going to turn them into books and the comics I wanted. So I was okay doing that. I don't miss them, but some of the comics I sold, I do miss. Hence the ASM 300 I went and bought back. And some of them, I lately I've been keeping track of my trades just to go back and say that I make a good trade as the market has moved, just for my own head, because I'm like, I want to either say yes or what an idiot. Why did you sell that?
I think too, like when it comes to that, like you can't be so black and white on it, in the sense that like, I can't believe I traded this for this when this is worth this now. I think it's like, you're not going to make a positive, we'll say, profit on every book in terms of like trading or selling, because of, based on like when you bought it versus what, like, for instance, like you and I got back in the comic books and Mike, your channel started in 2022, right? We're in still that peak, right? Like any book you bought then is below currently, right? And so, and you still might be able to make some money, but like, what you got to think about it is, did the movement I made on that book make me happier? And if the answer is yes, then it's a good trade.
Right. I mean, there's always going to be ups and downs. That's the whole thing with collectibles. So I mean, it's hard to, like, if you watch it all the time, you're not going to be happy. Same thing with people who are into stocks. I used, in another life, I worked for a stock brokerage firm for 3 years, but there are people who just stare at their computer and watch those stocks go up and down and have like anxiety about what's going on constantly. It's like, be in it for the long haul, right? Unless you're a day trader, like, you got to look at the big picture of it. What are you happy with your collection at the end of your whole collecting life, I guess, and the overall profit. It's hard for me to watch that go up and down, because you're right. I'll get hung up on it, and I'll be like second guessing every decision I ever made. So
yeah, like you said, the 20 years ago, buying the books that you said you could have bought, I mean, think what they'd be worth today, and that's part of the reason. The Hulk 340 I have was maybe $30 I spent for it. Maybe it's worth 300. I mean, that's a pretty good return, but it's not $300 now worth 10,000, right, on the Hulk 181. So, it's all relative, but shoulda, coulda, would have bought it then. And I'm the same way. I still have my Wizard magazine, seeing what that 181 and this Amazing Spider-Man 129 was actually priced at and what I could have bought it for. But that was big money for me back then.
Yeah.
I wasn't going to spend that on a comic, and I wish I did, but.
Yeah, that's the thing I tell myself. Even when I go back like 20 years and I talk about that GSX-1, I could have got for $300. Even at the time, being an adult, like being married, I remember thinking at the time, like, that was kind of a bit. We had just bought a condo, and we had just got married. Like, $300 is kind of a lot of money to put into a comic book at the time. Now, it's like, not that I'm like a wealthy person by any means, but now, just because of inflation and the fact I have a job and I'm older and I have a bigger collection, I wouldn't bat an eyelash at that now. It's funny how just like time changes, you get older, as does the economy. So it's even more difficult, like, for if you're doing apples and oranges, just looking back at time, I could be like, oh, it was only $300, but it was probably the equivalent of like $1,500 for me back then,
Yeah.
And what I think, just like in the stock market, time is what is your biggest friend. Not, I mean, buying it, like real estate as well. Another thing, but the price you buy it at and holding it is when you make your money. The guy who was my Uber in California told me the house that his father-in-law owns is worth $3 million over there. I know that's the case in California, but he paid 30,000 for it.
Yep.
So
I will say
I
that
mean, like,
that is one
property
of the,
is a different thing. Yeah.
but I mean, like, that's the thing with Errol though. He bought AF-15 for $2,000, and then he was able to sell one of them for 30, or all the way he got up to $100,000 AF-15 through through time, right?
Right.
So the real estate, that was like probably 30 years. Comics don't really do that, but it's just holding it, right? Not trying to flip right away, and being in it long term is what is going to give you return, not real estate return or not stock return, but close to it.
And
I
I
would
think
say
that's
real quick. One of my pet peeves is like, because of where like the housing market has gone, and I hear people like, "Oh, I lost X amount of money on my house." It's like, you just bought that 6 months ago. Like, relax. Like,
exactly.
You cannot evaluate the market on that short term for a purchase that large.
And I think it's dangerous for comic books too, because comic books and all collectibles, they're not quick flips. And I think a lot of people think of them that way. Like, you're gonna get this really cheap, you're gonna flip it in 6 months, it's gonna go up. It's like, no, I mean, like, they don't usually go up that much unless there's some serious hype. But even then, again, the margins, when you factor in like shipping or like eBay sale, all that stuff, when you factor in all of this stuff and the time you put into it, you're not actually making that much more money. You need to wait a while. It's not like blue chip stocks where you buy a whole bunch, and then the game, it's not like the GameStop stuff, where it like flips overnight and you sell these comic books. It's just not going to happen. It's a long-term buy is what you're doing.
Yeah, and it's like you were kind of making on your point earlier about like, I could just kind of build my pot and save to 181, say, and not buy these things. Or, I mean, like, kind of a lot of like, because what I started buying when I first bought or started collecting was a lot smaller stuff. And it's like, you don't need to necessarily flip those for profit. You could just sell them back and essentially make money back and put that essentially back into your pot. And it's kind of the same thing as if you just saved that whole time.
Right.
Yeah. Like your signature series that Rohan that you had. I mean, you sold a bunch of them, so you essentially got your money back for what you spent last year on that. So it's just the money went someplace. You got short-term enjoyment, and luckily you got all of your money back, or damn near close to it, that you could put that back in the pot to get the 181. Because there's like you said, Mike, I probably spent a lot more on little dumb comics here and there, going to the antique store, finding a stack for $100 and like, oh, look what I found. And then you're like, I don't want these anymore. Let me sell these and, find something else. And that's what ended up happening.
I mean,
so
the one that gets me, I was just recording last night, I was at a flea market, indoor flea market, ended up with a stack of comic books. I only spent like $71 and I'm like happy. I got great deals on all of these. But then if you actually look at like what $70 get you, I'm like, well, it's a lot of other books that I've like batted an eyelash at, because I'm like, I'm not gonna spend $70 for that. But but I'm okay buying a bunch of tiny books. Like, it's all relative, like it's a weird way of looking at it. I'm trying to get better at sort of looking at it that way. But yeah, it's all relative how you want to spend your money. But
it's something soothing about going through long boxes at an antique store and trying to find that
gem,
whatever that gem is. And I think I mentioned I found the Bone comics. The other one I had found was Detective Comics 259, the first Calendar Man. And I just went to a flea market, near my old hometown. The guy's like, I found this, and he found a New Mutants 87, but it was the second print, and he thought the New Mutants was worth all the money. And I knew that Calendar Man because I just saw it on Comic Tom or something, and he won $100 for that. Those two and Alf #1. And my grandfather loved Alf, so I was like, I got to take all three for $100.
I have Alf #1 around here. It's coming up on Monday. You'll see Alf #1 in my video coming out.
That's an awesome
it'll come out by the time this video comes out. But yeah, it's a fun story attached to that one. So
my grandfather loved it, so I had to get it. And I won't trade that Alf one, but I did end up selling that Detective Comics, and I kind of wish I didn't, but it was kind of beat up at the time, and like you said, moved it into something else. So but that's the fun of the hunt. And
it is.
I think once you get that one book, and I asked Errol this about Superman 1, he has a 0.5. I said, what's your next? Are you good now? Can you just die happy? And I don't think that's the case when you like to hunt, right?
No, I mean, you'll find something else.
Yeah, you're like, I want to find that. I want Action Comics 1. Maybe you'll never get it, but at least you're out there looking for it. All right.
Yeah, and it's just fun to hunt. Like you said, like going through the log and like, even if you find nothing, like there's enjoyment there for me, just like cruising through and just like looking, and like the hunt is like JP and I talked about this, Mike, earlier. It's like you could have a trust fund and you get $500 million. And you can go buy every comic book you want. That would not be enjoyable. Like, I would be boring. Like,
for a little bit, it would be.
Yeah, I mean, like, there's like, we talk about like an ideal budget would be like, if you could just like, for me, for instance, like, it'd be cool if like I would say like $1,000 to $1,500, because then it's like I still would have to wait to get some of these bigger blue chips that I want. But like I would still at that level. I would still have to hunt to an extent of like I got to find the right FF5. I got to find the right while you build your pot. And like that is what's enjoyable about it. Plus, then when you do acquire it, it means that much more to you versus like, oh yeah, I bought that. I mean,
that. Like, for me, it's the stories, and I like telling the stories on my channel. Like, yeah, I could buy whatever book I really wanted to. I could just go out there, not any book, obviously. I could, if I wanted something, but I'd much rather find it in the wild, even if it's worse condition. The fact that I say, I know I got this at this flea market. It was 7 a.m. It jumped out to me. Like, the story there makes the book mean so much more to me, and the fact that you got it cheaper. But it's mostly the story. It's a tale. You attach. You're putting an attachment to that book that's more than just what it is. And you're right. If you were just to go out and buy whatever you wanted, I don't think you have that personal connection to these books. They're just things you bought money, you paid money for, and it's just not quite the same. And that's sort of, again, it's not just the hunt, finding that gem, that hidden diamond. It's also the story of the hunt. It's the story of finding it, the feeling you got when you discovered it. And they're out there. Actually, Rohan, I have to tell you a quick story. So I was at Brimfield Flea Market last year. And it was one where I found that Spider-Man right there for a shocker. But the guy that had that, as I'm like buying it, old Marvel stuff, he had a book face down like at his table, and it had a price tag on the back of like $1,200, something like that. And so as I'm buying it, he goes, "Hey, you want to see something cool?" I said, "Sure." He's like, "I can't sell it to you." And he flipped it over. It was an FF48. And I was like, "Cool, where'd that come from?" He's like, "Well, I actually just sold it to someone. They're getting money, and that's why I can't sell it to you." But he's like, the first day of the flea market, some guy came up to me and sold it to me. I bought it off him for $700, and he flipped it for like $1,200. I was like, "Wow, that's pretty cool." Actually, I go back down to the other end of the flea market and walk back to my car. I'm going through another comic book guy, and he asked me, "Hey, did you find anything good in there?" I'm like, "Nah, it's pretty well picked through. It's hard to find like really good treasures here." He goes, "Oh, that's not true." He's like, "Did you hear some guy on the first day of the flea market found an FF48 for $40 in a box, and then he walked down to the guy at the end and sold it for $700." I'm like, "I think I saw that comic book."
Wow,
so he found that book in the wild. I mean, it was low grade, probably a 3, but he found it in the wild for $40 in a box.
Yeah, I mean, I've told JP this, like, because he has the ability to go out and kind of hunt through these antique shops, things like that. Obviously, the likelihood of finding FF48 for $40 is very low, but the more you do it, the more likely.
Right.
Because I mean, there are a dozen videos, more than a dozen videos on YouTube of people finding these gems. Like, there was a guy. This was not, we talked about it in one of our earlier episodes. Like, he has like, "Oh, I found these at an estate sale." And he put the pile of comics. There was an X-Men one in there. There was, and it's just like, the more you do it, the more likely you're going to strike gold, right? And it's like, all it needs is that one moment of striking gold where it's like, it's all worth it.
And no, in that his and her comics, they're always getting new comics. They get them from local people, and a lot. I hate to say it, but a lot of it is widows whose husbands passed away. We're getting to that age now. These people collected in the 60s, and the 50s. They're passing away, and then these collections come up. But same thing, like, you'd be shocked. Like, we think of these books as being scarce, and they are, because it was disposable entertainment. You read it, you threw it away. But there was a lot of collections out there in someone's basement or attic that have not seen the light of day, and hopefully they don't end up in the dumpster. But they come out, and all of a sudden there's this influx of a whole bunch of new books from the Gold and Silver Age. Like, they're there. You just we're waiting for them to come to light.
I mean, in general, I find it amazing. Like, the one comic shop I go to around here is, the guy's been in business for 33 years. And it blows my mind that this business is essentially predicated on people coming to them with these huge collections and selling to them on, 30 cents on the dollar, 25 cents on the dollar, and that they've been able to make this business work. Like, I was watching a video with Como Comic Books the other day, and he was like, right now in the Midwest, collections are just falling out of the sky. And it's like, it's kind of wild when you hear these things. It's like, your entire livelihood is based on the fact that you're waiting for someone to just happen to walk into your store and drop a collection, and yet it happens so frequently for these guys.
And like, they just put ads in the paper or on the internet saying, "Hey, if you have old comic books, let me know." And I've done similar. I've sent out, like, anyone local has anything, let me know, I'll buy them. But yeah, a lot of these people say, they say they pay fair, and they build a reputation. So it's word of mouth too. It's kind of like, "Hey, I sold my comic books, to to this guy down the street, and then their friend whose husband died, and they do the same thing. So I think it's a word of mouth, but it is shocking. You're right. The whole thing is predicated on an influx of old collections coming to light. It's amazing that they can that these stores are profitable. They keep
Now,
going.
you said paying a fair price. So what do you consider? That's the thing.
Well, I'm happy you brought it up. Yeah.
Yeah, I know I was going to bring up one thing that happened on your garage sale, but before we get to that, I had a couple where I went out looking to buy a whole collection, and these people kept telling me, well, there's Hulk in there, so that's worth this amount of money, and I don't want the whole collection. I wanted some keys, and it didn't work out real well, and I don't know what they ended up doing with the books, but they had books everywhere, and there was the small house. They were trying to get rid of stuff, I think, and make some money, with too many kids and whatnot. And I don't know what's a fair price. I don't want to, I don't know that you can flip them that easily. So you might say you checked eBay. These people check eBay and they have the listing price and they say, oh, it's listed for $2,000. No, check what's sold for, and they don't get that. And then I went to another house to look at a collection, and the woman had them all in these clear containers. And I said, can you take a couple out so I can look at them before I drive out there? And she's like, no, they're already packed up. So I drove like an hour and a half, went out there. There was nothing except 3 books. And I said, I'll give you X for the 3 books because I drove out here. And she was like, okay. I got a message before I even got back that she goes, you ripped me off. That one book was worth $100 some. I said, somebody came after me and said I would have bought that for $100. Right. I said, lady, that's he could say that all he wants, but what is it on eBay for? And we talked a little bit, and she was okay with it. But I'm like, man, I don't like doing that. And
again, it's not that's not your response. As far as I feel like that's not your She has the internet just like you have the internet. Like she could do all the research she wants. She's looking to turn it off or move it quick. Like if she happened to give you a deal,
and I spent time with her, and I said, those books aren't worth anything. I said, what you have toy-wise is what you should sell. I said, that's worth the money. And I told her, and I gave her numbers for people to call, and I said, this is where you'll make your money. And legitimately, that's the way she would make money. But she was pissed about one little book, whereas the information I gave was worth what she didn't get for that book that had it been in great condition. It wasn't, but I mean, it wasn't in great condition. Right. She might have got more for it, but you had your situation. You guy was going to get, go ahead. You can tell it. Cause I mentioned earlier about the 100 comic books.
Usually my experience is similar to yours. I mean, people don't really know what they're looking at. They just look it up on eBay and they just see what someone's asking for it. It's like, I've seen even people say like, oh, look, this book is worth $500. I'm like, yeah, graded in a 9.8. And that's ripped in half. Like it's not the same thing. And people don't understand the condition. That's far more prevalent. My general philosophy is to always be honest. And even though it doesn't always work out for me, I just treat people like I want to be treated. And so like, I just do it very nicely. I've met way more people who are like, these are worth way more than they are. And I'm just very nice. I'm like, hey, I'll just let you know, I'm not going to buy these. I'm not interested, but I think you're asking too much for the next person. You might do a better job. I usually do that once I already say, don't worry, I'm not trying to rip you off. I'm walking away, but I just want to educate you. I've done it. Usually, honestly, if you're just really kind and nice, like they understand. But yeah, there's been several instances in my life where not just comic books, other antiques where I've come across something. The person's like, yeah, 10 cents each or whatever. And I just looked at them and like, no. And that was what happened. So that garage sale, this guy had tons of comic books. The first time I went, I ended up with like, I don't know, a stack of like 50 of them. And I had a whole bunch of good stuff in there. Like the Secret Wars 8 was right on top. I had, First Mr. Sinister in there, a good Star Wars book. And I'm like, I had no idea what he wanted, like what this guy was going to ask. He clearly knew about comic books. And I said, how much for these? And he's like, how about 50 cents each, $25? And I just looked at him and said, no way. I said, this book right here is worth, at least $100. And he was shocked. And he didn't really even understand why. I had to explain like why. Like, he's like, it's just Spider-Man in a black suit. I'm like, but it's the first one. Like, that's where he got. I had to explain what it was. And he was shocked. And that's why I said, I'm going to pay you more for it. I'm giving him $100 for that. And then I ended up paying him like another like $40, I think, later in the day. And just for a small stack of comics. And he was so blown away by my honesty. That was why he called me back. And he had me come back to look at the rest of the collection. And he asked me, like, you want to buy them all right now? I said, no. Sell them at your yard sale. See what you can get for them. Whatever you have left, I'll buy from you. So that's why he called me. And that's why I had a really good rapport with the guy. He trusted me. And then when we looked at all those books, he ended up settling on 5 cents a comic book, which was insane. I even told him, like, that's crazy. And he's like, no, I want you and your son to enjoy them. You seem like you really like the comic books. And when I got home, I went through them and it wasn't 400 comic books like we thought. There ended up being almost 800. So when I'm counting them, I got to like 600. I called the guy. I'm like, I owe you more money. Like, there's way more here. And he goes, nope, he's like, you were really honest with me, and I want you to enjoy them. I know you will enjoy them, and I want you to have them. That is the power of being honest. It doesn't always work out. I could have absolutely bought that, Secret Wars 8 for 25 cents or 50 cents is what I could have got it for. But I paid the guy 100, and it worked out for me because I got more books because of it. So
you're a better man than me, Mike.
No, I mean, like,
yes!
it doesn't mean like don't get a deal. Don't be like, don't accept anything less than this. But I mean, I still got a great deal. Honestly, like, obviously, that stack of comic books I got was probably worth several $100s, not $100. But he understood that. I said, and I explained condition and things like that. So it worked out for me in that situation. But I feel better personally at the end of the day, knowing I didn't like, rip somebody out. Especially kind of, if the person's a jerk, fine. Like, I have a policy not to buy from jerks, but if you can kind of get a good deal off a jerk, I'm usually okay with that. But if it's like a nice person, like this is a guy who was just trying to clear out his garage, an older guy trying to get to retirement, I'm not going to do that. He lived right down the street from me, and I built up a great rapport. And he said at some point he's going to sell the rest of his collection. He's going to give me a call, so maybe it'll pay off. So that's my philosophy. Again, it's not the best way to turn and flip things, but that's why I'm a collector. I'm not a seller.
No, and I think that's a great story because the one I mentioned about driving out and she wasn't happy with that. I felt when I left there that was a fair price, and the information I gave was worth what my time, right, what she could have meant. Yeah. But she'd have been happier if I'd have given. I mean, I just lowballed the offer, and that's what she gave, and I didn't know what I could get for it. So I guess there's a difference between. I like what you did, Mike. I think that's the better way to be, and some of us getting.
I will say, JP, in your situation, I think a point Mike brought up is that a lot of people have the woman's shoes that you said doesn't understand like grade or quality. So it's like you saw the book, you negotiated a price with her that you felt was fair based on what you saw, right? The next guy that comes, like, let's just use that FF48 for example, right? She's like, oh, I just sold this guy a FF48. And the guy's like, I want to pay $1,200 for that. And it's like, the guy, for all you know, that FF48 didn't see it. It could have been like, completely beat.
And when you put something in front of somebody, they never pull the trigger that big. He probably would have done the same thing as you and undercut it. I mean, I think a good philosophy is I explain what it's worth. Like, I think these are worth this, or this is what you could get if you went to a comic book store. I'll pay you this. Like, clearly I will pay you less than what they're worth, but I'm being honest with what they are. That usually is enough to satiate people, especially if they know, like, you go to the comic book store down the street, they'll pay you 25 cents each. At least you're saying, I will get you more. So that's sort of my philosophy. Just be honest. Even if you're not going to, I think in general, people appreciate that and are more likely to work with you.
Yeah. And the first one I had was a big collection. I went through and I pulled out all the keys for them, and I was like, these are the ones I want. And they wouldn't sell them to me because they thought I was ripping them off. And then they had all the keys set aside to sell to the next person. I was like, I just did all the work for them, and they didn't give me anything. So it goes both ways. That happened to me first, and I met the woman. I thought I was fair, but I think you get further in the world when you do what Mike does.
Yeah, well,
you always want to be like Mike, right?
There's been a few times where I've told someone what they have, like, hey, listen, this is actually worth more than what it is, so I'd like to buy it for this. Like, well, no, I'm gonna charge more. I'm like, but you're only doing that because I told you. Like, I didn't have to tell you. I'm being honest, like, to hope that we can meet a middle ground. Like, nope, then I'm not selling it, and they put it away. Like, that's happened to me on some antiques before because they just didn't know what they had. And I was being honest, And there's been cases where I chose not to buy something. I saw it, really good deal, and I just couldn't do it. It was worth too much money. I said, hey, I'm not buying it. I got to tell you, you should take this off the table right now and put it in the back because what you have here is worth like $1,000. I'm not going to do that to you, but I don't want anyone else to do it to you either. If the person seems nice, I've done that too, where I'm not buying it, but I'm going to be honest and help you out because
I think also the situation, like you said, the guy that you got this girl, like, he's an older guy. It's not like a store, right? He's an older guy looking to just, add some money to his retirement pot or something like that. That's one thing. Like, JP, you and I have talked about this before, like, but you go to a store, right? Stores got overhead and it's got their margins they were, so they've priced everything to like make their business work. And in those situations, I don't think you should feel as bad because, like you said, if they have it marked for $40, they're okay with that price and it meets their needs for their business or whatever.
Stores are different too.
Yeah.
I mean, I've come across comic books that, based on the condition, I knew they had it too low. That Nova, you can't see it with the glare. I have a Nova #1. I got it at a comic store, $75. Looking at it, I'm like, this is like a 9.6. It should be worth more than this. Got it, had a grade, it's a 9.6, worth a lot more. Yeah, I put the work in to get it pressed and sent in, but I knew that they were a little low on that. But they still made $75 off me. It's not like, like they definitely priced out how they thought it was fair. And again, the margins are small and things like that. So you never know. But stores are a little bit different. But it's a little mom and pop thing, like an antique place. I'd think twice about it.
So Mike, actually, that reminds just so you made that comment. Something I wanted to ask you. So from watching your channel, you prefer raw.
Yes.
Right. But you also talk about how you do get a lot of your books pressed at the Comic Spa, I think it's called.
Yep.
So
great name for it.
Yeah, actually, it is a great name
it's
for.
Cool.
So you do that because you still want the book to look as good as possible, right? You're not like potentially going to send those off.
Right. Yeah, that's actually a cool thing to bring up. So like the guy at Comic Spa, Jeff, he's a great guy. We, through our comic book connections, we met, but now we're friends. I was talking to him last night. We were texting each other. He's a great guy, and what he's an older guy. He's a really good perspective on collecting. And his argument always is like, when you do clean and press these books, even if you're not going to grade them, you're preserving them forever. If it's a personal collection thing, like what you do to that book isn't going to go away. I mean, it's going to stay in that condition forever. And if you sell it 20 years from now, it's still clean and pressed, so unless you're going to be reading it and flipping through it, of course. So that's sort of my philosophy. I've had him clean and press books that were stained or like, there was a spine roll, he just takes it out. I don't need to grade it. I know I could, but it's the idea that this book has now been improved and in some cases preserved. Now he doesn't do like restorative type stuff, but a lot of stuff he'll do is he'll get rid of that dirt, so it's less likely to stain. He'll get rid of that water damage if he puts it through the aqueous bath. He's doing things that preserve the book, takes the acid out. There's certain things you can do that make that book last longer. So it's a part of the whole aspect of it. It just makes the book better. You don't have to grade it to have it pressed. Still looks nice in your own collection,
Yeah. And you like to read them because you're big on the stories and the art, correct?
I do. I'd rather read a trade paperback now. It's easier. It's more digestible for me, But I do read my older comic books. Especially the ones that are worth money. I'll like lay them out like some boards, and very carefully like turn the pages and kind of read, so I don't break the spine.
What's nice is like you can now read every comic book online. Like when I got my GSX1, even though it's still raw, I was like, I'm not gonna like open this up and who knows what could happen. My kid will spill juice on it. Right. And so I was like, I was like, but I want to read this. But so I like just pulled up. I just literally typed in read Giant Size X-Men 1. Boom, popped up and I read it.
And I read in the same way. It's just the idea that like I could open that book, especially like when I'm talking to my son or like a friend. I'm like, hey, this is the first appearance of a character. They're not on the cover and you would never know, but you have to open the book. So like when it's Hulk 180, it's the first appearance of Wolverine. But like if you put that book in a slab, no, it's not. It's not the first appearance of Wolverine. You can never look at it. You just have to know it's there. First appearance of Mystique in Ms. Marvel number 18. Like things like that. I like to actually have the book to open it. But if it's a book where the character's on the cover in their first appearance, I think it's sort of okay. Actually, I'm going to give you guys a spoiler for a video coming out soon. If you guys have time for it, I got this yesterday.
Oh, nice. Elektra.
Nice.
So she's right there on the cover. So, I mean, I got a really, really good deal on that. I'll explain it in my channel. It sort of, again, fell into my lap. But again, I've always wanted this book. I love the Frank Miller Daredevil run. I've needed this book for a while. Wanted it raw, but I'm kind of okay with it because I have the trade paperback of the entire run, and Elektra's right there on the cover. I can show this to someone and be like, this is the first appearance of Elektra, literally when you first look at this cover. So I'm okay with something like this. I don't have many of them, but there are some cases where I just like the aspect of it. I like how it looks. So
yeah, I mean, I don't read the stories, and I don't read much of anything. It's all internet reading and whatnot. But I just prefer the covers, and so mine are all mounted up in my room here, and I can appreciate the art because that's what got me into collecting was art. Todd McFarlane, Jim Lee, and I'm trying to read them. I have Dark Knight, the Frank Miller run. I have 2 trade paperbacks I found I have the 2 trade paperbacks that I found in antique stores. I can't read it. It's right next to my bed. I can't read it. There's no time.
I think you're just not a big reader, JP, is really what it comes
I'm just not. I'm not. I just can't do it. It just bores me. I'd much rather look at the pictures and try to copy what McFarlane drew and whatnot. But nice. I hear your show and I'm like, man, I wish I could read them because all the stories, all the back characters. I know them just from Key Collector, and that's the app I use to shop, when I'm out in the antiques, but I don't really know all the ins and outs,
I know a lot of them from the cards, actually. It's not just like the X-Men characters. I've read all the X-Men and Spider-Man books ever. I've read tons of them, but like a lot of the characters, I only know because I have like 4 or 5 cards of that character, and like
I'm exactly with you, JP. Real quick, I was gonna say maybe Mike and I can trade you for some of your big books, and we'll just get you some like pop-up books or something.
Ooh, nice.
I have one right here. It's a touch and feel Superman book.
Yeah.
So this is more my style reading right here.
There you go.
Big pages or big print, but no, I did like those cards. I have them somewhere, and that's how I knew the power levels of different people, like who could beat who and all that kind of stuff. And I like the speed was my favorite. 7 meant light speed, and I've always thought that was the coolest thing in the world because only the Cosmic guys could do that.
Exactly.
Very few, but DC didn't do that, so that was what they missed on their cards.
The other thing I like too, long before I knew like what a key was, especially like on the back of all those cards, it'll be like their first appearance.
Yeah.
But specifically, remember Marvel Masterpieces? Those cards, they were really cool. On the back of them, not only do they say the first appearance, there'll be like a picture of that character from their first appearance. So like when you look at Venom, it shows number 299 in that last panel where he's there. So when I was younger, I would always try to collect, again, before I knew they'd be worth money, just collect the first appearance of a character because it said on the card, oh, hey, I have that. But I still do that now, even though I know they're worth money. But the killer is like I'll find characters that are completely obscure that nobody cares about. For instance, the other day I found the Slug. He's a really big, fat like crime lord. I don't know if you know who he is. That Captain America fought.
Oh, wait, I know that.
You have it. He's in Series 3.
Series 3, yeah, the big fat guy with the white hair.
Yes, I found the first appearance of him. I got it for nothing. I got it for $3, but I had to have it because in my Marvel cards, it's the first appearance of one of those characters, so I had to grab it, even though it's worth. I like
a lot. I like taking a comic book and then putting a card related to it, and it's really cool because you remember the Series 1 has the selection there is like the MVC, most valuable comics.
Right.
So I've collected a couple of those, and it's like cool to like take a picture of the card with the comic book with it.
It's exactly right. Yep. Yeah, I did the exact same thing. Yeah, they made quite an impression on me, those cards. I think Marvel came out with those to market them, and it certainly worked for, I think, a generation of kids our age.
Yeah, and like you said, like you could, on the back of the card, you could get Spider-Man's entire 80-year history.
Oh, yeah.
In a couple paragraphs versus like, well, I've read 1 to 300 ASM. It's like, no, you just get the basics right here.
Right. Get the cliff notes is what you need.
Right. Yeah. It whets your appetite. There were a lot of characters I'd read and be like, oh, that sounds awesome. I'm going to check it out. Like Daredevil. Like I love Daredevil now, but I didn't know who Daredevil was till I got those cards. And I'm like, oh, he looks wicked cool. He's awesome. I need to start reading Daredevil.
The cards definitely help because everyone being there, you didn't read every comic, but you can go through the cards and if the character looked cool, but then again, as who drew him or her, right? Art Adams, Jim Lee, McFarlane, they drew them, they were cool. But if Ron Lim was good, I mean Mike Zack, but there's a couple that just were playing out terrible that I wouldn't collect.
Mike, do you have, since you're an X-Men fan, so we talked about the Marvel Series 1, Series 2, and Series 3. There was like they called it like X-Men cards. I have the entire Series 1. They have 100 cards in them, and it's only just mutant related. And it was Jim Lee did the art on most of those cards.
Yep. They're all blue, right? They're blue.
Yeah, the blue border.
Blue and
I got
pink,
it. Yeah. Those are not in. Oh, the blue and pink ones, or the
blue and pink ones.
So the blue and pink ones I do not own. However, my son got them as a door gift at a Comic-Con. He had a choice of much stuff. I'm like, pick those. Absolutely pick those. So I don't actually have those. I have some of them, but he actually has the blue and pink border ones. I have the other X-Men series that came out. I think Fleer or Ultra came out with them, where there's like artists, all different artists. And those are a little bit more artistic. They have like foil names. I have those too. But yeah, no, my son has them, not me.
What's funny, so I have the entire Series 1, Series 2, Series 3, and the X-Men Series 1. And, they always come with a checklist.
Yes.
And so when I went through them recently, when I pulled them out of my parents' garage now, like a year ago, I was like, because like the Series 1 was obviously the first one we collected because I was the first one. And we like legitimately checked off the checklist card. I was like, looking at it, I was like, damn it. Like, why do we check off that checklist card?
Yeah. Luckily, I had a couple. You always get a couple checklists. So, like, you had one that I marked off, and then I had the one that I actually had in the book.
One of these days, I got to go because like eBay, you could buy like individual cards. And so I need to buy that checklist Series 1. It's like $1 on eBay.
I recently, I was missing a couple from 3. I don't know what happened to them. I was only missing like 4, but I just got them on eBay, and they were like 50 cents each. So,
yeah, I actually, when I pulled out those collections, I needed, on 2 of them, I think it was like Series 2 and Series 3, we had them with, I don't know what happened to them, the holograms. Yes. And I found those on eBay, and I actually got those cheap. And they're like I know like my cards, those legitimately sat in a box for 30 years. Like those are not like, you can get a PSA graded. Like they're not anywhere. They're not even an 8, a lot of them. But some of those holograms, like if I was to send those, I'm planning to, because like grading a card is not cheap. But like, I feel like a few of my holograms are definitely 10s.
Wow. I mean, I don't even have all the holograms. That's the one, black hole in my cards. I don't have all the holograms or all the chase cards. So someday I'll have to fill those in for the completionist in me. Will have to.
Yeah, that's the fun part about eBay and the internet. You can find most of that stuff, but it's not as much fun as story-wise as you were talking earlier about when you find them in the wild or whatnot. But again, it completes what you're trying to do, whether you want that key book or finish that set. The internet, eBay has its purpose, or
Well, I mean,
whatnot.
there's the through line too. Like, the cards from when I was a kid. I saw a card, a character I liked, and sort of that starts your collecting journey, and then you have an end game, maybe with a book that's attached to that. I think that's just cool to kind of draw that line between childhood and adulthood. Because that's really, guys, that's honestly what we're doing. We're just reliving our childhood, the things that we think are cool. That's what all nerds are. Absolute gamer nerds. Like you guys understand this nerdy stuff that honestly I was made fun of when I was a kid, and now being a nerd is like the coolest thing ever, right?
I'm still being made fun of. I don't know if about you
really.
Guys, my wife, my kids, everybody.
I mean, I'll say two things about this, right? And we kind of touched on something. I brought this up in our episode with Lawrence that we did last week. Everyone spends money on something, right? And it could be, like I said, like I told that story about like the guy that asked me how I paid for traveling, and I was like, I don't have guns and knives like you spend money on, right? Or I have people that have, like your friend that keeps all his cars and he's just renting a garage in Pittsburgh to keep them. And like, we all have things, whether or not we want to say it or not, we all have things that we spend money on. Ours happens to be comic books, and so people can make fun of us for it, and that's fine. But like, it is what it is. Like, we all have our thing. And like, I find it for me, like all three of us here, JB's got 4 kids. Mike, you said you got 2 kids. I got 3 kids. Like, what I've loved about it is like, it's my thing that I can escape away into that has like really kept me, it's like we all need some things for ourselves that keep us sane. And comic books has become that for me.
Exactly. And as someone with a million hobbies, I can tell you that, maybe part of my YouTube channel was a little bit of just to keep my mind occupied. I didn't think it'd be this much work, but that's sort of where I'm at. You're right. I mean, it makes me a kid again. I enjoy doing it with my son, but I feel like a kid whenever I'm doing this. And I'm going to keep doing it because I think we all need a little bit of that, especially in this day and age, right?
Yeah.
So after what we all went through.
Mike, one of my final questions for you is like, what is your long-term, like, you have your son Jack, I think his name is, in your videos often. Yes. Is the end goal to hopefully like build an awesome collection, pass it down to him as kind of like a legacy thing, or is it to like just sell it all at the end and go on vacation with the wife? Or
oh man, I get that question from my wife every day. So I mean, like, I think the original intent, like again with all my collectibles, a lot of the stuff I'll pass on to my kids. But part of it is I want them to be their own person. The funny thing about my son is he loves the comic book characters. He likes all this stuff, but I think he's far more into like Pokemon cards, Yu-Gi-Oh. Like he definitely likes that more. And he goes back and forth in comic books, honestly. He you see there, he was having a good time showing him what I got. But yeah, I want them to be their own person. So I'm not going to presume that, like, here, enjoy these, do what your dad likes, knock yourself out. Yeah, maybe we'll have some worth money I'll leave to my kids. But yeah, I don't know. You ask me again in 10 years, there might very well become a time I'm trying to pay for college, or hey, yeah, maybe I'll sell a whole bunch and we'll go on vacation. That's what my wife wants me to do.
Yeah.
So I don't know yet. I don't have a good answer for that. I just want my kids. I'm not gonna force it on my kids. They can like whatever they like.
Now, when it comes to your YouTube channel, any goals for that before we end up here? Is there anything?
No, I have 0 goals for it. So again, like I started it for fun. It's sort of become a much bigger part of my life than I thought it would be. Like everyone always says, they want to grow the channel. I mean, I'm pretty happy with how fast it's growing. I just want to keep doing what I'm doing. My hope is that I just keep bringing interesting content. I mean, there's always a drop off on YouTube channels. People might just get tired of hearing me talk, or the same shtick of going through, boxes at a flea market. I don't necessarily think so. People love the hunt of it, like you said earlier, just like watching people hunting for things. I've gotten comments from people on the West Coast. Some guy out in Oregon said he was handicapped and he never goes to flea markets anymore. He could just watch me look for things. Like it makes him remember doing it. Like there's stuff like that which actually like kind of tugs my heartstrings. Or there's people who like watching me with my son because it reminds them of being with their child and liking comic books, and their child's grown up now and they don't have that experience, but they kind of live vicariously through me. So that kind of keeps me going. I want to just keep putting out stuff that makes me happy as long as people keep enjoying it. I don't really have any delusions of growing it much bigger. Like who knows where it'll go. Maybe let me travel around the country, go to some more Comic Cons. But yeah, in general, no, we'll see where it takes me. I just I'm having fun. I have no expectations. I'm just going with it.
Yeah, I think that's great. I mean, like as we talked about earlier, like I think that's one of the things I enjoy about your channel. It's just like it's just comic books. Like we're just talking about it, right? And like that's what JP and I kind of like why we wanted to do our own thing was just like everyone's got kind of their shtick or whatever, which is great. Everyone does a great job with it, but like I just sometimes just want to talk about comic books. And for us, like he and I will talk like, oh, do you see how many views we got yet? And it's like at the end of the day, like we could have no views, but like I enjoy this time he and I get together each week and record something because like super fun. And it's like as long as it's fun, which it is, I imagine being for a while, like I want to do it.
I mean, my favorite part is that I don't care how many people watch it. I love the comments. Like I actually love because I don't have many people I talk shop with about comic books like you guys. So for me, like I scratch that itch in the comment section, I'll ask people, hey, what's your favorite character? And like, you get some really deep takes, and I love it. Like, or what's your favorite comic book? And it scratches that itch, and that's my favorite aspect of it. So for me, this is like one big social experiment. This is just me hanging out with a whole bunch of people on the internet talking about comic books, and I want to keep facilitating that, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good way to meet a diverse group of people. I mean, I go to an auction every week. I see all kind of people there that I probably wouldn't, see outside of that auction, and I can kibitz, as they say, with them, talk back and forth. You got people commenting. I'd love to see more of that on our channel. I've commented on your channel a few times, and you've responded back really quick. There are other people that don't, and other people that don't. It's like, I'm like, he didn't even get back to me on that. I'm like, what a snob,
My wife's always like, are you going to answer every single one of those? I'm like, I'm trying. Yeah, I'm like, I really, as much as I can. I honestly really do enjoy it. And I think one other thing I'll leave you guys with, people always ask me, and actually I did a Q&A recently. I ended up cutting this question, my answer, because it was too long. But the question was, like, how do you start a YouTube channel? Like, it is, the technical aspect, what you actually need, and then there's a little of the personal aspect. And there's a lot there. I don't have the magic recipe, but all I can say is all I'm doing is being genuine. Like, this is who I am. Like, there's no pretense there. I think that's refreshing in this day and age. People go on the internet and pretend to be something they're not. And when people just like watching someone just being themselves and just talking about what they love, it's refreshing to people. And I feel like that's just a philosophy like all of us need. You guys seem like very natural guys to talk to. That is refreshing for people, and you will have success if you're just yourself. And I think that's what people strive for. That's what people want. They want that connection.
It's crazy when you think about, like, when I talk to, like, especially like with younger folk, I'm like, what do you want to be? And they're like, I want to be a social media influencer. Like
so do we, right? And it's like, so do we.
I know.
But I mean, it's funny. Like, I've told you the story, JP. Like, I think it's wild. Like, I've gone on vacation or traveling somewhere, and you're at some place, it's some cool picture shot place, and it's like you'll go there and you'll see like this like 14-year-old kid having his mom take 60 photos to make sure they're the right angle for their Instagram page. That I'm like, this is not childhood, guys. Like, this is crazy.
And I want to be clear, while you have the picture up, like, I hate the YouTuber thumbnail stuff. I hate the surprise faces. I hate it. I hate it to death. But it does work, one. And two, that's actually a natural picture. My wife took it, so I felt okay with it. But, stuff like that drives me crazy. It's part of playing the game. But in general, I agree with you. Like, how many times can you take a picture to get the right impact? Just be yourself. Just smile at the camera.
and that, like you said, that's what the success of your show is, because you're real, you're a good guy. I like the story of, the 800 comics is great. We all should strive to be more like that. And, you got your son involved as much as he wants. And it's a good family friendly YouTube I can put on and not worry about anything. My kids in the background going, oh my God, what's Dad listening to? No, it's a cool show. And I do enjoy it. I know you have plenty of subscribers. We just wanted to talk to you because we enjoy, what you do and get the time to talk with you. But hopefully, as people see us, you'll grow your channel and keep doing what you like doing.
I'll definitely give you guys a plug on the YouTube channel. You guys have a great show. I've watched a couple episodes when you reached out to me, and I really like your content, guys. Again, I love talking shop. It's fun to listen to a whole bunch of people talking about comic books and stuff I love. So I really appreciate you guys having me on. It's really special. Thank you.
Yeah, and JP and I say this at the end of every episode, like, for anyone watching, like, we love to talk this stuff. You guys want to talk with us? Hit us up. Yeah. We are always down.
Yeah, I'll come back again sometime. Let me know if you guys in 6 months, a year or so, if you guys
we'd love to have you on again. Absolutely.
Sure.
Yeah, definitely. I appreciate it. All right, everybody. Everyone have a great rest of your week. We'll catch you on the flip side. Take care.
Later.